I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're delighted to introduce you to a very talented author, Henry Van Berkel, and he has written an evocative book. It is called Walks by Big Alex's Pond. It is a captivating narrative that weaves a tale of Big Alex MacDonald, known as the Klondike King, his rise and fall in the Yukon gold rush, and the author's personal journey of discovery on the historic family land in Nova Scotia. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank our team at Bridge Literary Media for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support writers like him by subscribing to our channel and by buying this wonderful book. The links are below this interview. Henry, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
It's a pleasure.
What inspired you to write about Big Alex MacDonald and begin researching his life and times?
Way back in high school, I had a teacher in grade 12, Sarah McPherson was her name. She first mentioned Big Alec in class, incidentally, and I found out later that she had some marriage relationship with the Big Alec family. That was my initial contact with Big Alec. Subsequently, I read a little bit in Pierre Berton's book. He's a famous Canadian author who mentioned him as well. And then there was a local historical book come out a few years ago that had one page on Big Alec. But after we bought the property that was once owned by Big Alec, I became more interested and started to explore his life and found it extremely fascinating.
For the folks at home who are watching are like, okay, who is this Big Alex guy? Who is this Big Alex guy? Could you explain it to him?
Yeah, Big Alec was the son of a Scottish pioneer who came to Nova Scotia in 1832. And he was the fifth of 10 children. Grew up on a farm in a place called Ashdale, Antigonish County, Nova Scotia. But he had big dreams, and in the 1980s, he left Nova Scotia, traveled through the United States, had some success, and then eventual losses in silver exploration in the Western States. Ended up in the Yukon in the mid-1890s with $3.75 in his pocket, and started working for a company, and was working for that company when gold was discovered in the Klondike. And Big Alec didn't go to the gold fields right away, to the discovery, because he had an obligation to the company he was working for. When he eventually arrived in the area where the gold had been discovered, he bought a claim for a side of pork and a bag of flour. And that was the beginning of his fortune, because within a few days, he had hired a couple of people to work the claim, and they discovered the richest vein of gold in the Klondike. And within 18 months, he amassed a fortune, which is really unbelievable. In today's dollars, around $800 million.
Wow. Amazing, amazing. So from that point, his life was changed and he became a rich man and lived the life of luxury, or can you tell us more?
He was a very generous man. He started on a European tour, which a lot of people, successful people, moneyed people did in those days. Had the opportunity to meet with the Pope in Rome, was knighted by the Pope for his generous work donations to the church in the Klondike. Mm-hmm. He met with the Queen in England, got married in London, and then returned to the Klondike.
Very, very interesting. Now, you purchased property that is connected with Big Alex, right?
Yes, that's right. Big Alec's family, they were known as the Black Bills. There were MacDonalds. Mm-hmm. There were many MacDonalds in this area, came from Scotland. So to distinguish the various groups, they have nicknames. So these were the Black Bills. And the Black Bills developed a very successful farm on Ashdale Heights. Eventually, of course, as time went on, people went in different directions. The family sold the property to a local neighbor, and in in 1984, my wife and I bought that property, and there were still vestiges of a century ago. The old foundation of the house where Big Alec grew up was still on the property, and all kinds of rock piles that probably Big Alec and his family took off the fields.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, in the book, you also reflect on your own life and family history. Did writing this book change your understanding of your personal and family legacy?
Oh, yes, it did. When you go back into history, you start thinking and exploring, and it was a fairly difficult journey because my father, for example, grew up. He was born during World War I, grew up during the Depression era, got married. Soon after the marriage, the country, the Netherlands, was invaded by the Nazis. Yeah. My family went through the Nazi experience and the occupation. For a while, they were refugees, and my father was captured by the Germans. He eventually escaped, but he had, some interesting stories to tell. He didn't tell them to me directly. He would tell them to friends, and I would overhear them.
Now, did your dad eventually emigrate to Canada, Nova Scotia, or is that a move you made on your own?
Yes, that's right. In 1951, because the family had grown to 8 children by then, 5 sons, very little land in the Netherlands. We were a farming family, so my parents thought there would be more opportunity overseas, and they opted for Canada. And I think it was a wonderful thing that they did go to this country. Although when we arrived here, we did encounter some very difficult times, and one of the obstacles was a major fire we had on the farm that destroyed our livelihood.
Yeah. Fires, particularly in that era, were extremely devastating. Not that they're not devastating today, but we can combat them better. So your family had to rebuild from that great loss. And that seems to be a theme in your book, that there's loss and fortune and redemption and hope. And it's kind of like the ups and downs, the valleys and peaks of life, right?
Yes, it is, for sure.
Yeah. Do you guys still have a farm there in Nova Scotia?
No, the farm that my wife and I bought in 1984, we sold in 2020, just before the COVID hit, and the new owner sold it at a substantial profit, which I would have liked to have had too. But we're all right. We missed the property very much. There was so much history there, and so much beauty. And I explain and I go into a lot of that in my book.
Yeah. Love the title, Walks by Big Alex's Pond. And I guess those walks were basically your inspiration. Tell me a little bit about that, your inspiration, how the natural environment inspired you, the feeling of history there, and the writing process for you.
That's right. The inspiration started with a pair of geese that came and landed in our pond, which I christened Big Alec's Pond. It's a little lake, really. I liked the Canada geese, so I started walking by the pond to check on them daily, and that's how my walk started. We had a network of about 4 miles of good woods roads, so I would walk along those roads, check the geese twice a day, coming and going, and on these walks, I had lots of time to think and to observe nature. So I had a wonderful reaction with the animals on this property, and the birds, the geese. I could name probably 40 different animals. I explain some of these encounters in my book, including one encounter with a bear that I won't go into right now.
When you live in a rural area, and I at times do, encounters with bears are pretty scary.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And in Canada, often people have a big thing of bear spray on their belt, which is not a bad idea either.
I know I never took any bear spray, but my wife insisted I take a baseball bat with me because the coyotes were plentiful as well.
Yeah, exactly. I've got a big mag light when I walk my dogs in the night or early in the morning. I carry just in case those coyotes get brave. Tell me a little bit about what you hope readers take away from your book.
Well, I think it would inspire people to love nature more, especially the animals. Animals are just fascinating creatures, and there's an endless number of them. And I developed a sensitivity towards them mainly because of my wife. In my early years, I was a trapper and a hunter. I realized that trapping is a very cruel activity. It's something that I regret doing, but in those years, that's how I made my pocket money, and money was scarce. So I do hope people will increase their love for animals and for nature. And I had some wonderful interactions as well with especially one of my neighbors. And it's an inspiration to meet people who are humorous and who are smart, and a constant joy to have around. And absolutely. I find many people like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this book is a great opportunity for one to reflect on his or her own life, because looking at the history of Alex's family, your family, the connections with nature, I think there are commonalities there that resonate with all of us. Henry Van Berkel has written a wonderful book. It is called Walks by Big Alex's Pond. It is a captivating book that weaves the tale of Big Alex MacDonald, known as the Klondike King. So thank you so much for joining us here today, Henry.
It was a great pleasure to see you and to talk with you. And I hope my readers will enjoy the book. It's available on Amazon and Kindle and Chapters, Barnes & Noble, Kobe, and some other sites as well. It's really 3 books in one, as we explained.
Exactly. And the links are below this interview. Folks at home, it's a great book. Pick it up. Holidays are here. Pick it up for yourself. Buy another for a friend and gift it. Henry, thanks for joining us. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.